I'm really hyper-focused on a few neighborhoods, is that I believe we can do this well and codify what we're doing. Train, 5 to 10 people across the city who can do the same thing in the neighborhoods that they're passionate about, and then train people across the country to pick it up and do it in their backyard, right? If we're
Yeah.
all doing the right thing with the right intentions, I mean, we will all make money, sure, but imagine the amount of good that we can do with just, a few simple, focused people who really are finding, their passion and purpose in life.
Yeah. Welcome back to the Last Life Ever podcast. My name is Jeff Holst, and that over there is Jillian Sidoti.
That?
Well, I was trying to point, and I pointed the wrong way. Jillian Sidoti, the illustrious and famous and amazing Jillian Sidoti. So,
That's
Jillian,
much better.
Jillian, who do we have on the show today, and what are we talking about?
Today we have on Michael Scherer, who's, I've known for a very long time, and he is looking to change the landscape of affordable housing in a great city, but I'll let him tell you about it. Michael, how are you today?
Fantastic, Jillian. Thank you.
Awesome. So listen, we interview a lot of people on this podcast, particularly real estate investors, even though we're not a real estate podcast. That just happens to be who Jeff and I know. And I'm obsessed with real estate. I've always been obsessed with real estate, but you seem to have become obsessed with one particular category of real estate, and that is affordable housing, and affordable housing specifically in the city of Detroit. Why affordable housing? Why Detroit?
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, first of all, thanks, Jillian and Jeff, for having me on the show. This is great. Look, I grew up in the Detroit area, lived there for most of my younger years, and frankly, could not wait to get out. And for the last 20 years, I've been living on the West Coast. But about 10 years ago, I got back to the city. Actually was able to help with some of the work that went into preparing Detroit for the largest municipal bankruptcy on record. And in the time I was there, as much as we were doing structural things for putting new processes in place, consolidating and kind of, revising the way that business was done in the city, it was the work that we were doing to help the people, right? And so this notion of, and I actually just started using that this week, this notion of compassionate capitalism came along. And I'll tell you a quick story. I'm going to stop me if I get too deep in this, right? But so 10 years ago, I was sitting in an office downtown Detroit. It was about 4 degrees above zero, February day, 6:30. The new team had come in to take over with the mayor's office, and I got a call, and it was going to be like 4 degrees below zero that night, and there was a fire in a building, and there were 2 families that were living in this building. Now, it was a condemned building, okay, but they were squatting in the building. They had nowhere else to go, and the fire department kicked them out because it wasn't safe to be in the building. But now it's going to be 4 degrees below zero. Where are these families going to go? And I got a call from the mayor's office, right? Because they were still getting their feet underneath them. And they said, can you help us just to understand what we're going to do to make sure these people are taken care of? And there were 2 people in the office who were on it. They found 2 agencies to bring those families in for the night. One was going to be put into a different organization later in the week. The other one had long-term. And the groups that were working there were so amazing to house these people immediately. But the little piece that I played in that role, what that did for me was the spark. That was the aha of why I was doing all this other work. So now,
and how long ago was that? Give us a reference of how long ago that was.
Yeah, that was 10 years ago. That was 2014.
Yeah.
And Detroit came through this bankruptcy, and we didn't know where it was going to go, right? I mean, it was among the worst that many people had seen. In fact, the HUD person I was working with said that the 2 worst situations she saw were Detroit and Puerto Rico, 2014. Okay, and she was debating which was worse. Yeah. So it was a long way up, and so now you look at where the city is today. And Jamie Dimon came out last fall and had his State of the City address with, or a conversation with Mayor Duggan. And in the conversation, it came out that JP Morgan Chase had invested about $100 million initially. They're up to $200 million. And they're claiming that their investment in Detroit was one of the best investments they've made.
Oh, wow.
And,
Wow.
and so hearing that tells me that there's a platform that's built, right? A lot of the infrastructure was corrected, a lot of that's put in place. So you look at the situation now, and if you ever, I mean, I know you guys have gone to the city, but for those of you who haven't, please come on out and check out the city. When you're downtown, Midtown, Corktown, all these different towns, there's new buildings going up right and left. Amazing.
Yeah, it's actually beautiful, right? Like, I mean, and for people that don't know, I grew up in the western side of Michigan, so not Detroit, but I mean, I've been investing in Detroit since 2011. So I mean, I was ahead of that curve even, and Detroit has been perhaps the greatest investment I've made too. I mean, like the things that we've been able to accomplish there, and the returns that we've seen have been amazing, and we've been able to house a ton of people. So I mean, I'm excited to have you on because of that.
Awesome, Jeff. And yeah, we've also had good luck on investments. Um, if you think about the areas that have taken off and those that get the front page, you see a lot of this new build, and these are Class A
Mm-hmm.
builds. These
Mm-hmm.
are sometimes new people coming to the city, right? So as we looked at what the next 10 years looks like, and which is now 20 years, by the way, past the time we went through the bankruptcy, we're moving into the neighborhoods. The city's behind the movement of the neighborhoods. The people who have stayed there through the bad times now need to be able to also participate in the good times. And so we're focused on not those Class A builds, but more the Class C builds. And these are oftentimes in the neighborhoods, oftentimes neighborhoods that have been overlooked and still in some cases are lacking services. There's a study that was published by University of Michigan last year that claimed over 37,000 households in Detroit live in substandard housing. If there are 2.5 people per household, that's 100,000 people more or less, right? 1/6 of the city living in substandard housing. That was another big aha that said these are the people we need to help. At the same time, right, we're doing this not as charity. This is a for-profit venture. And having
Right.
underwritten 350 some odd deals in the last couple of years, I know what good looks like. I know what good deals look like. We've invested personally as an LP in over 1,000 units in Michigan and several hundred in Arizona. So I know what good looks like from an investor standpoint. So,
Okay, I'm going to stop you just for a second because you said a couple of things that for the people that aren't real estate investors on the show, they are listening to the show, they might not know. The first one you said was you talked about Class A and Class C neighborhoods and buildings. Can you give us a quick rundown of your understanding of the difference between those and what that means? And then the second thing is you said LP, which means limited partner. And I just want to clarify that with people that that's just a partnership structure that allows people to pool their money together to buy real estate.
Right. I forgot this wasn't a real estate show. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No worries.
If
And a lot of our listeners are real estate folks, so but we do want to be aware that there are some people.
Yeah, of course, of course. So for the layperson, if you want to think of Class A, Class B, Class C, Class A are going to be, the new shiny buildings that are probably going for top dollar. In some parts of the city, you might see 3,000, 4,000. I mean, there's even talks of some of these apartments going for $10,000 a month. Those are Class A properties. Okay. Class B, a little bit more toward an older style building, more middle class living. Class C is going to be a step below that. So probably buildings that have been somewhat neglected, maybe run down. In our case, we're finding properties that have been boarded up and just left behind. So we've got 4 now in the pipeline that we're working on, which have been literally boarded up, and we're going in and doing full on renovations.
Yeah, and of course, part of that comes from For people that aren't aware, there was a huge population decline in the city of Detroit, right? I mean, at one point, I think the population was near 2 million, and now I think it's 650,000 people, something like that. There's a huge reduction in population, which results in a lot of surplus housing, a lot of which has been since torn down. But there are still a significant amount of abandoned property as a result of that.
Yeah, that's right. So our target area is really around my university. Actually, I'm wearing the shirt today, University of Detroit Mercy, which is an interesting dynamic. If you look at the landscape to the north of the university, you've got some really pristine, beautiful homes, many that have been renovated or selling for $500,000 and $600,000 or more. As you work your way down from the north to the south, however, to the south of the university, we've been able to find properties that acquisition plus renovation costs put us at about $50,000. So quite a difference. And you can
that's for a house, right? That's what we're talking
about.
We're
talking a 2 or 3 bedroom house for $50,000
after renovation.
After renovation,
that's what you have in it.
Now, keep in mind,
and when we were buying stuff in 2011, some of these houses were like $5,000 or $10,000, and then you'd put $5,000 or $10,000 in them. So there is some upside there still that's occurred since then, but it's still insanely cheap, $50,000 for a house. I mean, there are very few markets in the country where people can live in a decent quality house for $50,000 or $60,000.
So true.
I mean, and the thing is, what I want people to get out of this is that if you're looking to do this form of compassionate capitalism through providing low-income housing, you can almost do this anywhere in the country. It doesn't have to be limited to Detroit, but Detroit is, because of the entry cost, because of the path of progress that goes through Detroit, it's a great place to start.
It's you know, especially because of the turnaround of the city, right?
Right.
So like there are places. I'm not going to pick on any particular place, but there are places where you could buy houses for that price, but you would not want them.
Yeah.
Right. Like you just would not want them because, and that's true in some neighborhoods of Detroit. Still, there are places where you can buy things very cheap, but it's not a good long-term investment.
Mm-mm.
It's not safe to be in the neighborhoods. That's unfortunate. But the way we turn that around is we improve the surrounding neighborhoods, right. And then those neighborhoods have upward pressure on them. And we see that kind of change in every major city that's gone through a transition period. And Detroit's interesting because it's in a different cycle than a lot of the rest of the major industrial cities. Places like Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and Allentown, they went through this, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, where they were 40, 50 years ago, they were like Detroit was 10 years ago. And now they're much more livable. They've turned around and people have stepped up and done the kinds of things that you're doing. So I think it's really, really great opportunity wise from an investment, but I think it's even more important because of the social element.
Yeah. I totally agree.
Yeah. You had said something, circle back to a comment you had made, like about services that are needed in these neighborhoods that they don't have access to. What are those services that you're talking about that are needed? And is there a place outside of real estate, for example, for compassionate capitalism to provide some of those services?
So the answer is yes, absolutely. And those services are, from even just like your basic conveniences. So from my house, where I'm sitting right now, I can walk 5 minutes and have, a dozen different restaurants to go to. There's a 7-Eleven on the corner. There's an ATM I can walk to. Anything and everything that I need, it's within a walking, couple of blocks from here. In Detroit, you don't have that. You probably have a gas station that has some convenience store aspect to it. There are liquor stores where, honestly, a lot of the liquor stores provide good meals, hot food, semi-fresh food. But if you're looking for, even like the Whole Foods market is a driving distance away. Meijer is a big shopping center in Detroit. Those are driving distances away. And a lot of the people that we're helping or serving, they don't have the ability to just jump in their car and drive down to the local, supermarket. They're taking buses.
Right.
Yeah, and this is a problem that's been identified for years, and it's often referred to as like food deserts, right? Like places where it's impossible to get good quality food. And if you live there and you don't have transportation, you're stuck with whatever options
Mm-hmm.
are there. So there are people that are living off of like convenience store food, right? They're having beef jerky and ho-hos instead of quality foods. And that's really unfortunate. And so what you're suggesting is there are options there. Of course, some of this is being mitigated by delivery services and things like that, but you still need to have
You need
resources to be
resources.
able
Yeah,
to
and
get
it's not
delivered
cheap
food.
to get DoorDash. It's not cheap, like all
Of
that
course
stuff.
not.
Yeah, that stuff's expensive. That doesn't serve that population. So there's a real, and it's funny because I'm glad you said that, Michael, like about the food and just everyday conveniences. And food's obviously a necessity, but it's nice and convenient when you can walk to a location to get food or what have you, and it doesn't have to necessarily be gas station convenience store food. Because I thought you were going to say things like social services, like psychological services or drug rehab or something like that, but no, it actually sounds like you could build a whole town within some of these neighborhoods of services that people need. And as the real estate happens, you can provide some of these as the population density goes up, right? And
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, I think Jillian, I'll just jump in here. I think one of the things that we're seeing, at least in Chattanooga now, is sort of a neighborhood market model,
yeah,
right? Where there's like small grocery stores. And I think that that's the kind of thing that people could jump in and do in a neighborhood is they could say, hey, you know what, I'm gonna, and it might even be if you're not in Detroit that you're doing things like providing services to allow those neighborhood markets to have access to
sure,
food. Because that's part of the problem, right? If you have a convenience store, even if you want to sell lettuce, you still have to have a supplier of lettuce, and no
right.
one's supplying those convenience stores, right?
Right. And at the same time, because also the barrier to entry, you could invest with somebody like Michael. You accept investors. I know Michael, right?
Yeah.
Through a fund where people can invest in your real estate deals that you're doing specifically in Detroit. And so they can find opportunities like your opportunity to invest straight in real estate if real estate is too big of an undertaking, right? Or they could start a food truck that services these neighborhoods, which is like still a big undertaking, but not the same undertaking as becoming a full scaled real estate developer. To me, it just makes more
Or they
sense.
could start a
Yeah.
they could start a fund to own food trucks. That's
let's
and then
not
and
let's
then
not make
people
this
can
really
invest in the fund,
complicated,
the food truck
Jeffrey.
fund.
Come on.
And
To me, the
Jillian and
easiest.
Jeff want to announce Jillian and Jeff's food truck fund immediately.
No,
You know
to
what?
me, it makes
You know
most
what's
sense.
cool?
But
Just
we're
to,
not
You,
doing that.
you,
Just to be clear, I'm not starting a food truck
you know
fund.
what's cool about these ideas is that a lot of these ideas are kind of germinating in the city. One thing that people don't realize about Detroit is how entrepreneurial it is. It's actually one of the leading entrepreneurial centers in the country.
mm,
Smaller scale than say Silicon Valley or Boston, but still it's pretty advanced in terms of amount of money that kind of comes in from VCs and so forth. But I have to address a couple things. So when you walk outside of any of our properties, there's a market nearby. The challenge these markets have is, to your point, they don't always have fresh food. They've got a limited selection. So it's not like you're going to get, the best
right.
variation of different, fresh fruits and vegetables. It's whatever they can get.
Right.
There's a food truck, actually an autonomous vehicle food truck that I'm sure
Oh,
somebody's
wow.
contemplating in the city. So that might be coming along. The other thing I wanted to mention is that, and Jillian, you kind of hit this, straight on. When we started off with the housing fund, we looked at all the different aspects that are needed for a person to be able to, just have a decent life, right? So our
Sure.
mission was to provide housing as a cornerstone of building your life, right? And then
Yeah.
isn't it convenient that cornerstone fits into that? But the wraparound services, where does the food come from? Where's the option for clothing, training,
Mm.
education? All the way up Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We're trying to
You
tap
and me,
in.
I love that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, always trying to move up it.
We're also wrapping around services by bringing in other people, other organizations, There is a building that actually a mutual friend of ours owns not too far from where we're investing, and their focus is on helping veterans. And the veterans that are housed in this apartment are all on a Section 8 contract. Um, we've got
Oh,
other
wow.
we've got other agencies and organizations that are helping people, whether they're previously incarcerated or coming out of some rehab program. If we can find the right agencies that are helping people to advance, to kind of get a leg up in life, the housing voucher that becomes available to those people actually fits perfectly with our bridging of affordability and providing reasonable returns to our investors, right? Because market rate,
Okay.
let's say market rate's $1,000 a month for rent, but if a renter can only afford, $600 a month, how do they make up that $400 difference? But you need the $400
Right.
difference to hit 1,000 to get the return to investors. So we do that by working with individuals and organizations to get the right housing vouchers in place so that everybody wins in this process and nobody gets kicked out of their neighborhood.
And I think that's huge because you hear a lot about gentrification and the problems with gentrification and how, little old ladies are being kicked out of their, the apartment they lived in because of like gentrification. And you want the benefits of gentrification. What are those benefits? Buildings start looking prettier, more
I
restaurants.
mean, the reality is, right, there's tons of benefits to gentrification, but there's a downside to it too. The benefits are it's a safer neighborhood, there's more services, there's more
Yeah.
options, there's more jobs, there's there's a myriad of positives that come from gentrification. But if you gentrify a neighborhood and you displace people to another neighborhood, you're necessarily putting pressure on another neighborhood.
Right.
If you can figure out a way to keep people in place, or even a significant portion of the people in place, right? I mean, you're never going to be perfect at this. Then you create a system that's much more sustainable long term.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, honestly, I love what you're doing, Michael. I love what you're doing. That's just why I had you on the podcast, because I just think it's so important for people to have these safe, affordable places to live. And if we look around, that is becoming harder and harder to come by. So it's almost like the perfect marriage of, like you said, capitalism and compassion without, this runaway train of capitalism gone wrong, you know.
Yeah, and the thing that's good about this, and this is why I've been really grateful to get to know you, Michael, in the last several months, because we have a mastermind that Jillian and I run that Michael's a part of, and so I've gotten to know you a little bit, and the more I've gotten to know you, the more and more certain I've become that you are exactly what Last Life Ever is about. Like, it's about living the best version of your life, doing the things that improve your community is one of the core tenets, right? It's one of our 5 pillars: giving back to the world, giving back to your community, but also making money and discovering your own purpose. Like, all of these things are in alignment here. And that's why I'm, think that this is not only is exactly what you should do, but you're a shining example of what other people should be trying to do. Not necessarily in the same field, but like identifying those core values and then pursuing them in a way that makes a profit.
I appreciate those kind words. I didn't set off to do this as the first thing I was going to do. We had talked about the $100 million fund, which we are still focused on. But as the economy did what it did, and rates continue to go up, and the whole way you do your underwriting of deals got turned around. At the same time, those 100,000 people in my hometown were still suffering because they didn't have a clean, safe place to live. So we launched the fund regardless, and we did it small scale. We're doing this without taking on debt initially, and a good reason behind this to keep it small and really hyper focused on a few neighborhoods is that I believe we can do this well and codify what we're doing. Train, 5 to 10 people across the city who can do the same thing in the neighborhoods that they're passionate about, and then train people across the country to pick it up and do it in their backyard, right? If we're
Yeah.
all doing the right thing with the right intentions, I mean, we will all make money, sure, but imagine the amount of good that we can do with just a few simple, focused people who really are finding, their passion and purpose in life.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, 100,000 people is a lot of people. There's no question about that. But if you help 100 people, it's still a lot of people, right? Like I provide housing with in my business for 350-ish families, and we try to provide affordable, quality, clean, safe housing for them. And I like to think that as a result of that, I'm impacting their lives and making them a little bit better. If you can change the life, in your case, dealing with people that might be displaced or maybe have no other place to live, if you can change the life of one family, it's worth it, right? If you can do that and make money, that's amazing. If you can do it hundreds of times over, and then maybe even multiply it and make it so that you can solve the problem for 100,000 people or all around the country, it's an amazing goal, and I'm so happy that you're able to work towards
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, actually, I did a math equation once upon a time that showed if a person got a good night's sleep and showed up to work just 4 hours more per week, what that translates to. And I mean, by the time you extrapolate this, you're talking about millions of dollars in revenue coming to the city. That's just bring more services, and it's a flywheel effect.
Yeah, and then of course it solves the tax base issues that they have, and then they don't end up in bankruptcy again, and the whole city becomes better, and then the state becomes better, and then the country becomes better, and the world becomes better because of it. And it's funny though, it's kind of, at least to me, it's funny that you mentioned that about getting a better night's sleep. Jillian and I just interviewed someone about sleep earlier this week. And then the other person we interviewed earlier today was somebody who went from being actually homeless to being an entrepreneur. And so like, this theme seems to be coming back. This is like the week of all of these things over and over again.
Oh, it's like we're in a vortex of compassionate capitalism. That's going to be my new thing. I used to call it benevolent capitalism, but I like the compassionate capitalism, I think, better.
Well, do we worry that if we say compassionate capitalism that we're getting too close to like the George W. Compassionate conservatism thing?
No.
I didn't even. That didn't even come to mind, to be honest.
Well, it's gonna now because I brought it up.
Yeah, now I'm gonna have reticular activation. Thanks a lot. Of
course, anyone who's under the age of 45 will have no idea what I'm talking about.
So we're safe. We'll keep calling it. Now you got me putting on my head. Compassionate capitalism.
I ruined your business model for you. No, but I do really like that compassionate capitalism, because capitalism, I think, and I mean, I think we all agree, is probably the best system that's ever evolved to run an economy. But it doesn't come without pain. Just like gentrification is good in some ways, but it doesn't come without pain. Like these things have rough edges, and if we can smooth those edges even a little bit, it makes the world better. And that's what we want to do. And I think that's what we're all talking about.
Yeah, you like trailblazers.
Michael, can you please?
You can't leave a trail of destruction behind you, right? You got to bring everyone
exactly.
No. Michael, could you please share your website where people could find out more information about your fund? And maybe some people will come and invest.
Also how maybe they can get a hold of you as well. Yeah, if there's a way to do that.
Oh, it's on your website or something.
Our website is atlantecapitalgroup.com. ATLANTE capitalgroup.com. You can reach out to us.
That's awesome.
Yep. And our contact information's there. Our team is available 7 days a week, and we look forward to hearing from people.
Awesome.
By the way, that's not just for investors. That's for people who have ideas on, how we can collectively move this along beyond just the real estate.
Yes. Yeah. Well, look, I'm one of those people who's like, this sounds like a really great idea that I do not want to do myself.
Yeah. And
I appreciate hearing about, hey, this is there's nobody in front of our faces right now. This is not a hard sell to anybody. If they're interested, they'll go to the website.
Right.
Yeah. No, I love this too, because I know how hard it is to operate in the market that you're operating in. Like, having had that experience, it is very difficult, and a lot of people have failed. But you've taken the time and energy and effort to develop the systems that work, and it can be very rewarding and still do really good things as a result of that. And so I'm really happy that you're doing it, and I want you to keep doing it so people can go invest with you. That's perfectly fine.
I have no problem with that.
About it. But if they want to take your model and have a conversation with you and do the same thing in Puerto Rico or in Indianapolis, it doesn't matter to me. I'm happy about that too, because it's going to make the world better. And that's literally our goal at Last Life Ever, is to help people live well. So
absolutely.
Thank you so much for being here. Jillian, do you have anything else you want to say before we jump off here?
I want to remind everybody to live the best version of your last life ever.